with your product stuff, you can start working on the drone. So here's just a couple pictures of a drone. The biggest thing that we need to keep in mind is that we're not going to try to build this out of one big piece. Okay, some people try to do that. It's not going to work, especially because we're going to be animating these things. We don't want to do that. So I have a couple pictures that I pulled up of different things with drones. A good idea too is to look up these assembly things. If you're not sure about something, you can look up these assembly parts, and they actually break down like what the individual parts look like. So for this one here, it has a really good picture of the blades. So I may need a picture of just the blades to figure out what are the blades doing. Okay. So I'm going to jump back into Maya, and I'm going to make a project. So just like always, we always want to make a project. We set up our organization right away. If you skip this step, it will come back to bite you in the butt later. So new project, I'm going to call this Sarcona Drone, Monday, Wednesday, and I'm going to put it inside of my folder. Okay, so it goes in my work folder. There's my project name. Hit accept. There we go. Okay, so where do I start? That's the biggest question that you're going to have. You know, where do we start building this thing? This shape is obviously not a solid shape. Like we started off with a cylinder and we made a cylinder shape, right? Or we started off with a cylinder and we built a cap, or we built a lid or something. This one's a bit more organic, so we have to kind of look at it in a more organic fashion, kind of break down what are the basic shapes of it, and then how do we extract and pull stuff off of it to make it look a little bit more natural. So looking at this piece here, I'm seeing this kind of like looped piece like this that kind of conforms into that. Okay, that's what I'm going to try to create. And so to do that, I'm thinking I'm going to use a cube. That's what I would start with, as a cube for this. So I'm going to create a cube, and everything's polygon. We haven't touched NURBS at all. We're just using polygons. And I'm just creating a rough representation of that box. That's all I did. Okay. Now I know that in this case, I'm going to be pulling out these wing parts here out of the top of that. Okay. So the bottom is nice and smooth, but the top piece has these extrusions pulled out of it. So then I have to figure out a way to do that. So a lot of what we're going to do with this assignment is not going to be a 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. It's going to be a let me see what this looks like. Am I getting the right shape? Do I need to undo it? Do I need to scrap it and try something else? Do I need to just do whatever? Okay. So I'm going to add some divisions in here, like let's say 3 that way, say 2 that way, and 3 that way. Okay. This gives me kind of a uniform look to this, and I'll do 2 that way. Okay. Because I want to do is grab this, this, and that, these 4 pieces here, and I'm going to extrude them. Okay. All the tools we used before, bevels, extrudes, inserting edge loops, we're going to still use those 3, but we may pop in and start using a couple other ones too as the need arises. So with this being pulled out like that, if I hit 3, you can see how I'm kind of getting that drone kind of shape. One of the things that's going to make this look realistic is if we have these sharp edges like this mixed in with these soft edges like that. That's what really makes these surfaces work, is having that blend of soft and hard edges. Even though this isn't completely hard, it still makes it look correct. All right. Also, this kind of blobby look, like right now that looks really blobby, doesn't look like molded plastic. I'm going to hit 1 again so I can see this, and I'm just going to start deforming this. So I'm going to grab these pieces here, like that, and like this, and like this. And all I want to do is just make these thinner. That's all I'm doing in this case. So I'm just going to grab it and just scale it out. So that made those pieces thinner. So now when I hit 3, you can see we have more of like that drone type shape. Now on this one, it's more of like a multiplication thing, like an X or something, right? So I want to have those be more multiplication and not more like that. So I need to grab these and pull this more like that. But I need it to be uniform, right? So right now it's not uniform. If I tried to grab all of these like this, they're all going to go this way or that way. If I tried to scale them, it's going to make them thicker, and it's not really going to work. Okay. So now I'm going to introduce a new concept, which is kind of symmetrical modeling. Okay. If we modeled half of this, we could flip it over to the other side, right? That makes sense. We could flip it over. What we could also do is model it symmetrically two ways, in that we could model a corner, flip it over, and then flip it over, okay? So if I were to go and delete half of this like this, I actually like to have the other half. Delete half of it like that, you can see that all I'd have to do is take this and do mirroring geometry. So I've already cut it. See this mirror cut, mirror geometry? I've already cut it, so I don't need to do the mirror cut. I'm just going to do mirror geometry, and I'm going to send this in the positive X. I look down here, it needs to go in the positive X, and now I've rebuilt it, okay? So this is a quick way to model something, just a piece of it, and then flip it over, and it automatically connects everything together. Now, that's one way to do that, but I have two pieces here. These pieces in the end will look exactly the same. They'll just be flipped, right? So I'm going to add an edge loop right down the middle here. And I'm going to go over to my ring. I'm going to say set this to 0.5. And then I'm going to delete that. So now I have one corner of this. That corner should be the same for every single corner. So once I'm done, I can just mirror it, and then I should have everything set up and ready to go. Now, in order for this whole thing to work, this edge right here, all the way around here and all the way around there, cannot move away from where it's at, okay? I can move it up and down like this, that's no problem. But what I can't do is I can't grab this edge and start to pull it this way, because now as it starts to mirror it, I'm going to have a big gap there. And just so you can see the big gap, I'll go into here. This is going to go in -Z. You can see there's a big gap there, and obviously we don't want that, okay? So I don't move that edge away from that. If I move it up and down, it doesn't move it away from that edge, away from here, this line, this blue line here and here. I can't move those away. So I just have to be very careful about those things. So I'm going to grab these and just kind of start shaping what this is going to look like. So this is going to come down a little bit further. This is going to come down a little bit like this. This here is going to come out like that. And if we look at it, I'm going to jump to the top view. If we look at it, this is too flat. Like it should come out at that angle, not come out at some weird angle and have this weird cut on it. So I'm also going to rotate it like that. Now when I do that, this gets a little bit thicker, right? So it's a little bit thicker right there. So I'm just going to scale it down about like that. All right, that looks good. Okay, so I can hit 3 and still look at it and see what it looks like. That's looking better than it did before. I think I want to add a bevel around here. Now if I'm not sure about a bevel, you try it, see if it works. If it doesn't work, you undo it. That's no big deal. So I'll add a bevel. I'll lower the bevel to like 0.2. Maybe I'll put in 2 divisions. We'll hit 3. And now we have something that's a little bit harder coming off of that edge. Okay, so that seems like it's okay. I can always delete edge bevels too. Like if I just go over here and grab this edge, shift double click that one and control backspace, it gets me back to exactly where I was before. So don't think that even though we can't undo a bevel that we can't get rid of it. We can. I'm going to leave it on though. Okay, now this piece here, if we look at this edge, this comes out and then it kind of gets a little bit bigger. So I'm going to grab this face, I'm going to extrude it, I'm going to pull it out. Because I pulled it at some crazy angle like this, you can see that, there it is, that it's going off some weird angle. This is obviously way too long too. I'll have to fix that. So I'm just going to scoot that over. And I'm also going to just make this bigger. So I'll just pull it out here, pull that out there. And let me jump back to the top view and just pull this whole thing a little bit closer. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to grab that face again, and I'm going to extrude it again. I'm going to pull it out again. I'm going to extrude it again, pull it out again, scale it down again, and then hit 3, and you can see how we kind of have that little pad. So it's kind of looking like that right now. Not yet perfectly, but it's getting there. Okay, so I'm going to jump to my front view, and you'll do this a lot. You're jumping from front to side to top to perspective just to see what things are looking like. And I'm just giving this a little bit more thickness here, and let me deselect all these. There we go. So I gave that a little bit more thickness, and this is a little bit thinner, just so it has a little bit more height at the end. All right, so that's good. All right, So now I'm going to go into this again and take a look. That looks pretty good. It's pretty tight. It's not loose like when I hit 3. This again looks kind of blobby in how it's kind of shaped out. I want it to be a little bit tighter. So I go and add bevels. And I'm going to make sure that the bevel goes all the way around here, all the way around there. When I come back to this side, I'm looking to see where the bevel goes. It comes in here. It should go down there. It should go over here. I'm going to add my bevel, hit 3, and now you can see we have more substance to that arm. It actually feels like it's pulled out a little bit more, like it actually is a piece of plastic. Maybe another line here though, so maybe 2 segments. Alright, that looks pretty good. I think I want to have the the frac should be a little bit more, so maybe 1. It's a little bit softer. Now this introduced a different thing. So if you look here, you can see how weird this transition now looks. Okay, so I'm going to go through and kind of clean this up. So I'm going to grab these edges. I'm not hitting just regular delete anytime. I'm always hitting Control backspace to delete it, and that's the clean way to do that. And for these, I think I'm going to Control delete these 2 and Control delete that. This distance here is just way too much. It's kind of like stretching it way across it. And what should happen is, thinking of like your gradient mesh tool, if you were to use gradient mesh in Illustrator and your points are going all over the place, it creates this big mess of lines. We don't want that. So what I want to do is draw my own lines. So here's another new tool, which is the multi-cut. And it allows us to click on a point and to just redraw what that point should look like. So like we talked about when we did our definitions, when we model things, we like quads all over the place. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm drawing this so that I get quads all over the place. So here I have 4 sides, 4 sides. There we go. Okay. So each one of these faces is 4 sides. If I counted the edges that make it up, it's 4 sides. This one's 4 sides. This one's 4 sides. Okay. Now this edge is no longer needed, so I can Control delete it. And now when I hit 3 to smooth it out, see how much nicer that looks? Where we don't have some weird like ripply, twisty thing right there. So it's all because I went through and deleted edges I didn't need and created nice loops for edges that I did need. Now in any of these cases, like let's say that this is too harsh up here. This is too hard of an edge. I want it to be maybe a little bit softer so I have a different transition coming off of this. I can grab any one of these edges and just pull it down, okay? Or any one of these edges and just pull it in. And then when I hit 3, I'm going to soften that transition. So now this looks a bit softer than that does, okay? So don't be afraid to, again, play with those edges, play with the vertices to get different looks of how you want these edges to behave. Here's another area that's looking kind of weird, okay? And as I hit 3 and 1, I can definitely see the issue. See how it's going from this squarey-ish, this squarey spot to this. Because I don't have quads, 4-sided faces, it doesn't like that. So I switch back to my multi-cut, and I go here, and I'm just drawing it straight across. There we go. So now this face is a 4-sided. This one is not. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 faces. So I'm going to jump to the multi-cut, and I'm going to cut this straight across this way. There we go. And now when I hit 3, we'll see that that corner looks a lot nicer than it did a second ago. All right. Now we can still do the same thing. I can grab this, and I can pull this over. And I want everything to nicely blend and smooth. So if I pull that edge over, I also want to grab these and pull these over too. And then as I hit these down here and pull these over a bit, there we go. Okay, so now that's going to soften this edge and keep that edge a bit harder. Now I may want to also grab these. I'm thinking I'm going to pull this over a little bit more. Just pull that back here. There we go. And I'm just going to extrude this and just pull it up a little bit. Now this will introduce a different kind of issue that we have. I'm going to hit 3 just so we can see it. Oops. Let me make this a little bit more apparent. Pull this up. There we go. All right. So we have this little bulgy area on the top of this, but as I extruded it, it created faces on this side. So anytime I'm extruding one of these edge ones, it's going to create these side faces too that I have to make sure I delete. Otherwise, that same thing of getting it to mirror correctly, it won't work. So then I can go into here, grab all this, add a bevel to it. And now you can see how I'm kind of creating these little areas that look like plastic. I'm also going to delete these. Delete. There we go. All right. So now I did move all my stuff away. So as I started pulling this top piece out, it started pulling that edge away from that grid point. So what I need to do is if I go to my right view, you can see it. So you see how this edge is no longer aligned with that blue spot. It has to be. So I'm going to grab all of these, I'm going to go to my move tool, and I'm going to double click it. And inside of one of these settings, the move snap, I'm going to make sure that retain component spacing is off. I'm going to hold down X and grab the blue arrow, and you'll see how it snaps it right to that edge. I'm going to do the same thing in my front view. Grab these points, hold down X, snap these in alignment. Okay. So there's one arm of my GoPro or my drone here. Now again, this is kind of like maybe thicker here, thins down there. So at any point I can say, okay, well I want this to be thicker at this point, so I can always grab these points here and pull it down. And then maybe just to exaggerate that further, let me just scale these in. So now we're creating that look of kind of like molded plastic. So we have some soft spots, we have some hard spots. It's looking pretty decent, okay? So now I'm going to mirror this. So I'm going to go to my mesh tool. I'm going to say mirror geometry. I need to mirror it in the negative Z. Okay, looking at this down here, the positive Z faces this way, so negative Z faces that way. So I just hit apply. There it is. And then I'm going to mirror it this way, and that will be in the positive X. So I go to positive X, I hit mirror, and there it goes. So now I hit 3, and now you can see how I have this base for my drone. Okay? Now focusing just on that corner, we can spend a lot more time working that out instead of trying to fight all these other corners to do what they want to do. Now this exact method is how you would model something like a car. You model half of it. Model a character's face. You model half of it. You model a couch, you would model half of it and then duplicate it over, right? So as much stuff as you can figure out how to break apart so that we can only focus on one area at a time, the better off you're going to be. All right, so there's our regular drone pieces here. Again, it's not like it has to be complete. It's just a matter of getting us to that next stage. So maybe I pull this down. That looks nice. Okay, so now we have this like little battery component part or something there. That's kind of cool. All right. So now I need these. You can see these little pieces here that are kind of attached. I didn't model these into it because it would be a pain in the butt to try to model those into it. So I need to create some sort of device. It doesn't have to be exactly what this one is, but some sort of device that would allow me to make it look neat and protect my hands from the blades if I were to touch it. Okay. So like this one here doesn't have any protection on it. So if our I don't know if you heard about the one singer, I can't think of his name, but he was on stage, there was a drone flying around, and he tried to like grab it, and he like sliced his finger nearly off. They're very dangerous. So we want to have protection on these. Okay, so I'm going to put like a little cage around it. Now again, I'm going to go with what I know. So I'm going to say it's going to be round, so I'm going to start off with a cylinder. And I don't need a top or a bottom to this, so I'm just going to delete the top and the bottom. There we go. And it should be pretty narrow like this. Maybe it's wider like that. Okay, so there's my round piece of this. I do need some way to kind of connect it to the rest of my item here. So if we looked at that one like this here, you can see how it's kind of connected into the base and it's like above it like that. So we could have this kind of mounted or welded like inside of our inside of this thing. I'm gonna pull it back where it was, but just so you can see, I can put it kind of like that. Okay, maybe taller. Wrong way. There we go. Make it bigger. Like that. All right, so now we have some protection on there, and we have something that's going to grip this or attach it to the actual base of this. So let me just reset my X, or reset my Z. Something like this that I'm modeling, I model it around the origin. I have not moved it in the X or the Z because I don't want to screw up that ability to mirror things over. Part of the reason my mirroring worked perfectly here is I didn't move this way or that way. I literally created a cube and started modeling it right at the origin, okay? I moved it up, which is fine, but not away from it. All right, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I leave this right at the origin, right at that center point, and I'm just gonna give it some thickness. If I can remember my hotkeys, it's a good day. There we go. All right, so I have my extrusion. I'm gonna go with my edges, and I'm just double clicking all my edges. And I'm going to bevel all my edges. Tiny bevel, 2 divisions, hit 3, gorgeous, okay? Now just to give it, again, some different look to it, once we get it into place, we can start extruding pieces down and get it to like look like it's attached somehow, okay? Right now I'm not gonna do that because I don't know where it's gonna end up. But while I do have it here, I know that my propeller is gonna be centralized right inside this area, so I'm gonna build my propeller. So looking at the shape of the propeller here, where does that picture go? Right here. What shape do you think we should start off with?
Rectangle.
Cube, right, rectangle, yeah. So I'm gonna start off with a cube. Now, we're modeling one propeller, so one propeller is like half of this. It starts off narrow, gets wider, and then gets thinner, right? And then there's a little bit of a twist to it. So let's focus on just half of this. I'm gonna put it over here. Let me go to my top view because I wanna see where this point is. That's the point that it's connecting to that centerpiece. So I have to make sure that it fits within that and doesn't look ridiculous. And this is where I'm kind of also looking at the design, saying, do I like it? Like, one of the things about a lot of these is in order for this thing to lift off, these blades have to be pretty huge. There has to be a lot of wind pushing these things up. So if I made tiny propellers, it would look ridiculous. So I need to make sure that my stuff looks big enough that it makes sense. So just to kind of eyeball this, if I put that right there, I think it needs to be a little bit bigger. So I'm gonna grab this, I'm going to scale it up. That way I can take this piece and I can scale this up, scoot that over. There we go, good. Okay, so that's right there. Like we said about the shape, it's going to start off at the start of this pretty narrow, then it gets bigger, then it gets narrower, right? Tiny, bigger, there, okay. So I have 3 points that we talked about. We have the tiny point, the big point, and the narrow point at the end. So I need to have a division for each one of those spots. So I'm gonna go over here to my cube, and in the, I don't know which one it is, maybe width? Nope. Maybe depth? Yep, there we go. So in depth, I can have that. I need 4 divisions so that I have a spot for each of those. So I'm just gonna go to my vertices. I'm gonna say here it's narrow. Just scale it in, that's all I had to do. Here it's wide. I did only need 3, whatever. We have an extra one, so we can just kind of taper that in. There we go, so something like that. This can probably come down a little bit further. This can probably taper in a little bit more. This is a little bit too thick, so let's thin that out. All right, and then we have the twist to it. And there's not a, I mean, there's a lot of twist if we look at that one there, like basically like a 90-degree angle. But I think that's just the angle that that specific propeller is. All right, so let's go here, and I'm gonna take this and twist it like this. I'll twist that like that. And I'm just twisting these a little bit more, just a little tiny bit. There we go. And then of course I want to look at it. I want to see, what does this look like? I think I need to exaggerate it a bit further. Okay, that black part popping through is just the other side. Okay, now if I created a cube with too many divisions, this would be impossible to do, to keep this nice and smooth. But because I have a good amount of divisions, it's not doing that. Oops, let me twist this the other way. I'm getting into this spot where I'm twisting everything, so it looks like there's no twist at all. There we go, so that's looking better there. Don't want that to happen, there we go, okay. So now if we look at the thickness of this, it's a pretty uniform thickness, so I don't need to change anything there. Maybe just a hair. I'll scale these down. And then scale these down too. That should be good. All right. And then I'm going to go through and just bevel. Okay. I want to smooth this out so it's nice and smooth. So I need to add a bevel so I don't lose my shape. What? And I didn't select these, but somehow I did. So I'm just going to deselect them. Make sure these are deselected at the bottom. Perfect. Okay, another bevel. Hit 3. It's a nice looking blade. Cool. As we start moving stuff, like right now that's kind of hard to see. Here's another tool that I'll use commonly. This button right there turns your wireframes on so you can see your wireframe with your shaded. So it makes it easier to see all your stuff you're working on. So I typically will have that on while I'm working because it's just handy to have. All right, so now I can put this kind of at the center here. I'm going to need to create something to hold these things, so I'm going to create a cylinder. So something like that should be good. And now we're going back to our product. So it's basically just like the same kind of things we did in our product, just kind of putting in a series of extrusions to create something that looks kind of fancy. There we go. It's a problem with hotkeys. If you don't remember them, and you have a problem. All right, more bevels. Oops, there. Nope. There we go. All right. I need a bevel on the bottom of this, and probably just a little bit more fanciness on the bottom. That should be sufficient. Okay. So more bevels down here. Right there, bevel. And bevel that. 0.2, 2. All right, I'm gonna turn my wireframe off just so I can see what it looks like without it. All right, that looks pretty good. The only thing I don't like is the top of this. Might be hard to see. No, you can see it better than I can. There's a big asterisk like up here, okay, where all these edges and these points are kind of coming together. And the reason that is because of the smoothing. So when we take an edge like this and we're kind of coming up, and then it has nowhere to go up here, it does that, okay? Easy fix. We just have to make sure that the very top of this has another couple divisions. So I just extrude it and pull it in. And now if I go back to Object and hit 3, you'll see that we don't see that, okay? So it's an easy fix, just needs an extra extrusion. All right, so that's cool there. So I can take this and duplicate it. Now, as I duplicate this, I want to duplicate it and kind of rotate it around. It seems like they have 2. I'm not sure why the common fad is to have 2. All the drones I looked at had like 2 blades on each one. None of them had like 4. So that's what we're gonna stick with. But I want to duplicate this and basically rotate it around 180. So I'm going to go to my pivot, which is the D key. I'm going to hold down X, which is my grid snapping. And so I'm just going to grab this arrow. And what this should do is it should snap it to my grid. So I'm moving the pivot of where this thing's going to rotate from right to there, and then I let go. So now when I duplicate it, I can rotate it around 180. And it ends up right there. Perfect. Okay, so that's great. And then I can take this and that. And I'm going to jump back to that one that I had where I had the double. Like that. Okay, and I think this piece here probably needs to come down a little bit further. Just because that's what's going to actually mount to the piece here. That should be good. All right, so I'm going to take all these pieces. I'm going to Control G to group them. I'm going to modify center pivot them. And then I'm just going to move it over here. Right about there. Okay, so you can see how it sticks in right here, like that. This is not, right now it's floating, it can't float, that's impossible. So I'm going to find a good edge, or a good face to go with. Now this is smoothed out, right? So if I hit 1 and 3, you can see how it definitely is smoothed out. If I go and start extruding faces from this, it's going to screw up that smoothing. So I actually want to go to mesh and actually smooth it out first. Now it won't screw up my smoothing. Okay, so now I can grab this face right here and there. Those two look good. And this is me eyeballing. This isn't anything mechanical. This is just kind of like that might work. So I'm just going to pull it down with the move tool. There we go. Now we're a hair off, but here's the quick fix. Is we just rotate it. There we go. And now it looks like we planned it that way. Okay. So that looks pretty cool how that's set up there. I don't think that would really support that, so I just want to give it a little bit more fake support to this. So I'm going to go and grab a couple more faces. That looks good there. This looks good here. And I'm going to extrude it. I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to extrude it again, pull it up. And what I did with that is I created this. I wanted this face, so then I could take that face and extrude it, and then pull that right into that. And then I can just take this and just nudge it down. There we go. So that looks like that has a little bit more support to it. It looks like it actually could be something that, you know, would function. That's the idea here, is that it looks like it would function. Maybe it actually wouldn't. But I could also do that same thing with these. I could have also created this piece as a separate piece. That way, if I needed it more places, I could duplicate it and rotate it around. But I have to be careful because with this wind, the idea is with wind being pushed through that's driving this drone, I can't have too many things blocking it because otherwise it wouldn't work. All right, so I have all of this stuff here. So I'm going to grab it and hit the up arrow so I grab the whole group of that stuff. I'm going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to move it over. Now, just like we were doing with our mirroring, where we can flip it over to this side here, I need to do that with this item. Okay. If I simply moved this over here like this, you can see now this platform doesn't really match up. It's like really off, and then this line here is really off. Now I could just rotate it, right, and that would get it closer to where it needs to be, and sometimes that will be sufficient. In some cases, though, it will not be. Okay, so I want you to see the other way to do that. So I have this group. I'm just going to call it fan blade, and I'm going to group it again. Okay, so I've grouped my fan blade. I'll call it second group, and I'll call it blade and not bacade. There we go. And the pivot ends up right here at the origin. So what I'm going to do is duplicate it, and instead of trying to move this over, I'm going to scale it. So you see how I can scale it this direction and it flips it over? That's how we can do that. So I'm going to negative scale it in the X direction, and that gets me right there. Then I can duplicate that again, scale it in the Z direction to -1, duplicate it again, set that to there. So now I ended up with my 4 points. Okay, so this should get you a good start at tackling this assignment. You can see how it's not going to be as simple as cylinders with a bunch of bevels and whatever else, but it's along those same lines. Yes, sir.
Is there a reason that, as with this, sorry, but is there a reason you can't just use that same mirror adjustment you used originally?
the other mirror adjustment is for connecting things together. Okay, so if I modeled half of a face, I want to flip it over and connect those pieces together so I have one piece. So with this, I don't want that, because then when I spin my blades around, they can't spin around themselves. It's like one big chunk it would spin around. Okay, just so you can see that. If I went to, let me duplicate it so I don't screw up my other one. If I went to mesh and I said mirror geometry and I said positive X direction, it's flipped them, but now they're like part of the same piece. Okay, so that doesn't help us. All right, now there are other tools too that, you know, eventually we'll get further into, but this is like the gist of what we're doing. So the only couple new ones I've introduced, multi-cut, that's a new one, and then the mirror geometry is a new one. Everything else is pretty much the same. I did find out too, you know how we get these black surfaces, just for fun while we're talking about stuff. So we have a surface here and we delete this, and we're like, why is that black? Well, we can go under lighting and say use two-sided lighting, and it'll automatically just light both of those. That used to be a default, and they turned it off somewhere, and just whatever. Just find these things out as you go. All right, cool. And then the cool thing about this too is that everything's already set up, so that as we come in here and we start grabbing stuff, and I start making new groups, and I start center pivoting things, and we start animating it, you can see how, because I modeled it perfectly, that this would spin perfectly. If I didn't do that correctly, if one of my blades is off by an inch, then it's gonna like warble. Just to, again, kind of show that example, we'll just pull this over a little bit, just so it's really far off. We'll go back to center pivot, and now, so you can see how it's not spinning perfectly, okay? So because I modeled it right through the origin, made sure everything was lined up perfectly, we're good. All right, now I can also take this whole setup here, just while we're doing this too. Hit the up arrow to grab all my groups, duplicate it, and I'm gonna negative scale it in the Y. And then I'm gonna move it up. Like that, maybe. I thought I might be able to do this, but apparently not. I might have to create something different for the bottom piece, just because that's coming in like that. Or maybe not use the bottom piece. Yeah, maybe I'll do something different. It doesn't need to have them, it just looks fancier. That's the idea with all this, it's just fanciest. Just make it fancy. Yep, so next class I'll go over some more stuff, how to add some more additional pieces to this. So we can add the legs, we can add some mount for the camera, we can start adding some little details of like holes and vents and whatever else, seams, just anything that's going to make it look really